Hello and welcome to the second episode of the At Recess podcast. I'm joined by five students here in my fourth grade classroom, and today we're going to be discussing the first book in the Spiderwick Chronicles, The Field Guide. So we just listened to this book read aloud by Mark Hamill. We enjoyed listening to him read it aloud to us and are kind of interested to talk about, and I'm interested to see what these guys have to say. So I kind of want to start off and talk about the characters. Now, there's three main characters, and let's talk about those. So let's talk about the first one, Jared. So what did you guys kind of think of Jared?
I think that Jared was an adventurous young boy, a little obnoxious sometimes, like getting into fights for no reason at all. But I think he was mostly adventurous and kind, and he's also pretty curious. And I honestly, if I were in Jared's shoes, if I had to face the exact same things, when I figured out there was something on our wall, I'd be like, I'm out of here. And probably just scream, told my mom, and maybe we move out again. But he's not like that, and I appreciate that.
I think Jared is adventurous, nice sometimes, but whenever he gets accused for things, I think he gets a little bit offensive. But I mean, you should just tell him, and probably next time that it happens, don't go downstairs and try to fix it.
Yeah, he definitely did get himself in a little bit more trouble.
I think that he's very brave because he didn't know really what to expect inside the walls. They thought it was a squirrel, but they weren't absolutely positive. So him going and even being the only one that goes into that library room because none of his other siblings did until the very end. Him being the only one, I think it's very brave of him because he didn't really know what to expect up there.
Yeah, I definitely would not have done what Jared did, going up in that dumbwaiter alone into that dark room that you didn't know anything about. So he's definitely braver than I am in that regard. Let's talk about a little bit more about Jared. Rudy mentioned that he, while some of us think he's brave and kind of curious, he was getting into a lot of fights, and that was really different than I think, because we didn't really, see him get into any fights in the book. That was all just kind of talked about. So what do you think about the fact that he was getting in all those fights? Why do you think that was happening to him? And why do you think that was kind of going on? Because that didn't really fit the Jared that we saw fully.
Well, I know that it said part of it not at the house, but I know it said that part of it at school was because his dad left, and so his mom said that he'd start getting into fights more at school because of after his dad left, he started getting into more and more fights for some reason.
I think that is because he's worried and afraid, and he doesn't really know what to do, so he just gets into fights. Or it's the other thing. I think that the other kids might be teasing him that his father left, and like me, he can get emotional about that and just boom.
It kind of lashes out a little bit.
They'll unleash the beast.
I think that he's just kind of like if you put yourself into his shoes, you can kind of feel what he's kind of feeling. And if that happened to me, I think I'd probably be mad too. And if somebody kind of flips your lid, you're going to be really, really mad and just start fighting them.
Okay, so now we talked about Jared, and I know we kind of learn or know the most about Jared, but what about Simon? There's kind of one big thing we know about Simon, and that is what's kind of the defining characteristic? Yeah,
he
loves pets. Is there really anything else we know about him other than kind of his love for pets?
Yeah, I think so. He also is a nerd, you could say. Nerds are very smart people, but it's kind of a mean name. But I mean, if you want to describe someone smart, that's what you use.
So maybe intelligent, we could say. Seems to be intelligent.
And he also reads a whole lot of books. And I know that because when Jared kept reading, he was surprised and said, well, Jared, why are you reading so much? Usually I'm the reader around Jared. So that told me, hey, maybe he reads a lot, which makes him intelligent.
Yeah, very good
So,
observation.
I think he's also a little bit like, I think I forgot the word that I was gonna say, but I think he's very sensitive because when he had like his mice and his tadpoles, the tadpoles were in the freezer frozen, and his mice were taken away. I think, and he was very upset about that. But I don't think some of that means he's necessarily sensitive, but I do think that he really loved his animals. So I think that's adding on to what Rudy said about him loving animals.
Yeah, it kind of shows that he is, kind of compassionate, and he does have things that he cares about. Like he, cares about those animals, and really, while you may not care too much about a tadpole because it's not something like a dog, he really cared about those tadpoles just as much as he did any of his other animals, I think.
it does make me wonder, actually. Okay, I just thought of two questions. A, they both have to do with money. A, how did he ever get enough? Wait, never mind. I know the answer to that. And B, how did he ever get enough food, enough money, enough food to feed all of those animals? I don't know how many he had, but he had at least 3 different types of animals: tadpoles, mice, and birds. So how did he get enough food and enough money to buy that food for all the pets? That makes me wonder. But I'm glad he managed to do it, but it does make me wonder.
I think from observing about how he like went out and looked for the tadpoles, I think he might like go out and look for the food that he feeds his animals. Like maybe he'll go out and look for like crickets or something, but I think he like goes out and finds them.
Very good observation. And I think that also he may read so many books about those animals that he might know exactly what they eat, and he might be able to find them in nature. Because, like, birds eat birdseed, mice eat cheese, and tadpoles eat. What do they eat actually? No. But yeah, you got my point.
I think
Awesome.
that's true, Rudy, about Simon. I think that we're talking about, right?
Mhm.
Well, yeah, I can see what Rudy got from that.
Cool. Now, we got two really like one more main character, and then another character that I guess you could consider a main character, Mom and Mallory. So let's talk about Mallory. We don't really hear as much about Mallory as we do Jared and Simon, since Jared kind of seems to be our like main character, our main protagonist, and then Simon kind of right after him. But Mallory's right up there too, and she has a lot to do and very important roles in this first book. So let's kind of talk about Mallory a little bit.
I think Mallory is kind of defensive. Like whenever she gets mad or something, she goes all out whenever she is mad. Because, like, why would she fall asleep with a fencing sword in her bed? And then, like, she fences whenever she's mad, but she's also kind of kind because she didn't accuse her brother, but she also did call him names, so that's kind of mean too. But from what I observed, she's nice a little bit, but kind of mean.
Mallory is a little aggressive, like kind of like she threatened burning a book about mystical things just because of a few scratches and in a couple messes. I think that's just, but she's also forgiving because she remember when they went to the thing for the last time, she forgave Jared, even though he didn't do anything. She thought she did. She cooled down. And I also think she's a little selfish. You know what I mean? Like, she went upstairs and then Jared was about to write down, but then she was like, hey, let me write it. And I think that's just either bossy or selfish. Probably both of them. So
I think part of that though was because she did get her I think she was really mad at Jared just because she thought that all the things that was happening to her, like getting her hair tied to her bed, to her headboard on her bed. I think, and the mess in the kitchen. I mean, around the house. I think that she thinks that all was made and done by Jared. So I think that she's like kind of selfish towards him and a little mean towards him, just because she thinks that it's his fault that all these bad things are happening to them.
Yeah, I agree, Ava. But and also what you said about the book, I don't think she was threatening. She took it away and she said, "This is the book that started everything that happened. That's why she probably wanted to burn it." She didn't want to actually threaten. He was just mostly just saying like, "Let's get rid of the problem, solving it by this, and just ruining the book." So it's kind of like solving the problem whenever you do it.
I never realized that. Very good observation, Gabby. I don't remember everything because it's been a while, but I remember a lot of important things. She's also. You can talk.
Yeah, Rudy, you brought up a good point about how she was kind of angry, but then you brought up a great point about how she ended up, forgiving, Jared for this stuff that went on and changed a little bit. I just want to read one part from the very first page when Jared is talking about kind of what jobs he and his siblings would go on to have, and he didn't really know for himself, but he knew without a doubt for his siblings. He knew that his brother Simon would either be a veterinarian or a lion tamer, and he would have said that his sister Mallory would either be an Olympic fencer or in jail for stabbing someone with a sword. So let's talk about that line. It kind of seems a little strange, but what's the author trying to get at there with that line? What's she trying to say?
That she's kind of aggressive or like gets really mad maybe easily, and like she does it and she doesn't really think about it properly.
I think that it's kind of describing them, because I feel like it's kind of like, I've not describing them, but like it's kind of saying that Simon is an animal lover, so would most likely do this, and Mallory likes to fence, so most likely she would do this, or.
So I think, we know that Mallory's super passionate about her fencing, right? But the way that she almost reacts a little bit in the book makes me think that what he's trying to say there is like, hey, she is maybe a little bit more aggressive, or she doesn't like to be wronged. And so if someone wronged her, she might retaliate. Like when she got her hair tied to the headboard, she went to sleep the next night with, her fencing sword. That she wasn't going to be wronged. She was either going to get even with whoever it was, or maybe she was going to get revenge or wanted to defend herself.
I agree, because she did, like, why would you fall asleep in your sleep with a fencing sword? Like, you could stab yourself in the stomach and that would just go wrong.
Yeah.
But, like, she wanted to get even, so she's kind of, the saying, you better, well, not the saying, but, like, what some people, whenever they get mad, you better sleep with one eye open tonight.
Do you want us to talk about a little bit about, like, what we think of the mom?
Sure, yeah, because she, we kind of see, like, them interact differently with each other. Like, Simon and Jared interact differently than, they kind of do with Mallory. But the mom seems, I don't know, it seems like she's got some troubles going on, or something going on, because she's not, I don't know, she's not the most nice person, but I think she is trying to be. So let's talk about the mom a little bit.
I think that that she's nice, but she's also a little bit afraid maybe, because right now they're at somebody else's house and they're trying to get back on their feet because of their dad moving away, or was it dying or moving away?
They are not together anymore, is what it seems.
So that's happened, and I guess he got the house and he probably had to move because they wouldn't have anywhere else to go there. So she's kind of maybe afraid to lose the house because, like in the book, they said like something about that, like how they're moving, and like she wanted to have like a house, and she was afraid that her her mom probably is going to sell it and give it to somebody else instead of them.
I think that the mom is like a little I think like kind of how Gabby said they're trying to get back up on her feet. I think that she's just kind of somewhat overwhelmed with the fact that they just had to move. Um, she's had to move. Her and the kid's father aren't together anymore. So I think that she's just trying to. I think she's just overwhelmed with having so many changes that just what's happening inside the house. She just what's happening to the house is kind of one more thing that she has to add on to her plate to think about. So
I honestly would say that she's unbelievable. No, I don't mean like that, like, wow, unbelievable. But I mean, like, has a hard time believing because Jared was pouring her heart out to her, telling the truth, just pouring his heart straight out to her. And she didn't even flinch. She stayed firm and just blamed Jared for everything, even though he poured his heart out. So I don't think she's believable. I don't know exactly what trait I use to describe this where she doesn't believe you. I don't know what trait to describe that, but
I have a comment. Oh, you can go, Ava.
Okay. I think that she won't believe it unless she sees it happen. Like well yeah,
like,
she won't believe it. Like when Jared she saw Jared sneaking around in the house, she didn't believe him that he was I can't remember what he said, but
yeah,
she wouldn't have believed him because she didn't actually see what was happening, and she didn't like believe him because she didn't see what was going on and anything around the house.
Yeah, I also think that too. But I have to comment on what Rudy said about like pouring his heart out. He really wasn't pouring out his heart. He was kind of just saying like he didn't do it. Like I can see where he got it because he kept on saying, "I didn't do it. I didn't do it. I didn't do it." But like Ava said, I think she's more of that because whenever she saw Jarrett last night, whenever he was pouring the flour trying to catch the fairy or the barget, whatever it was, she saw it and then yelled at him. And then the next morning, it was a bigger mess than it was. And then his mom thought it was him because she saw him last night doing this stuff. So she thought that he probably just came back down and did it all over again. Just made a bigger mess than it was.
okay, I understand what you're saying, but I have something to add on to what Ava said about she doesn't believe until she sees it. It's like what they say. They think that believing is seeing, but that's not true. Seeing it is believing. So she needs to believe and then she'll see it, but she needs to see with her own two little eyeballs. And she actually did. Because remember, she saw the footprints, but she thought that was just junk. So she just swept it away like it was nothing. So I don't know, Wizard. I didn't.
And it also said that you can go, Rudy.
I agree with Gabby, but kind of I kind of edging between. I like kind of agree with Gabby, but I also yeah.
Okay. I think that part of it was because she never heard the sound. So she never heard the sound. So I feel like when her kids were trying to tell her that they heard the sound and that's what they were looking for, like when Jared was trying to tell her that's what they were looking for, I think she didn't believe it at all because she didn't hear the sound or anything.
Let's we kind of I think we learned the least about the mom, but we've had the longest discussion about her. So I want to give you one last thought about her, and I want you to put yourself in her shoes or your parents' shoes. Okay, so imagine that you are your parent, or you are the mom in the story, and people keep coming up to you, your kids keep coming up to you and saying like, hey, there's something in the walls, we think there's something in there, and then all of a sudden one of your children has their hair tied to the headboard after two of them got into an argument that night. Then the next morning, later, you come down and you see that the whole kitchen is destroyed, and your first thought isn't fairies, because my first thought, if that happened in my house, wouldn't be fairies, right? It would be,
Like
hey,
fairies are
someone did
mythical.
this. So when we're thinking about the mom, she's then, getting really mad because if they're disobeying her, they're destroying the house, it seems, and they're fighting with each other and getting into fights. And she's doing all that she can to try and fix it. And then all of a sudden, as she's doing it, they just keep disobeying. And then when she asks Jared, like, why'd you do this? Why'd you do this? He said, it wasn't me. Like, it was this thing inside the house. How would she take that? Do you think she kind of took it the way that you would expect someone would in that case, or no?
Yes, because if I was in her shoes right now, like having that where like Mallory's problem was the main thing that started it, because whenever Jared and them got in a fight, she she thought that he reacted out and thought he would get payback on her. So I could see how she believed that he did it instead of her, or the little thing. And also, whenever you think of fairies, you think mythical creatures. How can they come to life? They're not real. So why would you say they are here and you just be confused, and then having the other problems and you seeing it last night, like you thought, oh, okay, he came down again. And then whenever you think your kid is lying to your face, but they're actually not, it gets kind of confusing and crazy. And her head is probably overbloated with all the that are happening right now for her.
I think I think that I think that some of it like maybe like how they messed up the house, like something went crazy inside the walls and then decided to come out and messed up the house. I could like somewhat believe that, but then the headboard thing and the footprints and the tadpoles frozen, I necessarily wouldn't really believe that some animal or whatever it was inside the walls actually did it, just because I don't think that something like that inside the walls would have that kind of intelligence to freeze an animal or freeze some type of animal or tie something or tie hair to a headboard.
Let's go ahead and move on from the characters. So we've got a good understanding of these characters. So just a little bit of background for the book. Jared, Simon, and Mallory and their mom, they all move into this new house on the Spiderwick estate, and it's a dump. They called it, like a shack. It was pretty run down. We learned that they weren't allowed to go up in the attic or the third floor because like half of it would pretty much collapse if you walked on it. So it's really, they move into this raggedy house. Pretty soon they start hearing noises in the walls. They kind of investigate. They end up in this secret room, and in that secret room they find this note. Jared finds a note, which leads him to find a journal, he thinks, but it's really a field guide. And so let's kind of talk about that field guide. What's the deal with that thing? Because that kind of helps us understand the story a lot better. So let's talk about the field guide.
I think that the field guide was written so that as an informational story, but or if you know what I mean, but the writer of it never got to publish it, and when the house was left, I think they just left the book in there.
Oh no.
Or it was so treasured or it was so rare that he had to hide it and then forgot about it. And then eventually, Jared was able to crack the code and find the book. So that I actually think that now there might be somebody else who might be able to tell him what the book means, or and like another one of the books, I think someone might be able to tell him who wrote the book how to help his house or whatever. I don't know. Everything in this first book is practically resolved. So I don't know the problems in the next books, but and I think the next books that somebody might, the author of the book might. I'm not saying that is it. I'm just saying that's what I think. I've never read the.
I want to add on to Rudy's. I kind of agree with you, but the thing is, that whenever I think, like, they thought it was a relative of his family because it was in their basement. So he wanted to know, like, probably why is it here? He's probably confused. But also, the book is probably a big part of it. So it tells him information about it and how to, like, get rid of the stuff and do it. But I can also see how, like, if he wants to get rid of the noise in the wall, he's going to have to read the book to figure out what it likes to lower it out and capture it.
I have a question. I have a question about I'm guessing it's kind of like a riddle kind of thing, but was the riddle inside the book, or was the riddle separate from the book?
Let me see. I believe it was on top. It was not in the book, because when he goes onto the desk in that secret room, and he finds the handwritten note that said, "In a man's torso you will find my secret to all mankind. If false and true can be the same, you will soon know of my fame. Up and up and up again. Good luck, dear friend." And he found that in that secret room. He found the book once he kind of solved that riddle, he found it in the secret chest compartment, the compartment in the chest in in his attic, I think, or the third story. So he found them separately.
I wonder why they set that riddle out and he found the book, but then at the end of the book, I can't remember, was the Bogart actually was it actually a Bogart that was with the mice?
Ooh, that leads me into one of my questions. Why don't you guys jump in? You two seem like you have something to say, so why don't you jump in about that Bogart and the mice and everything about that? Go ahead.
The Bogart they actually kind of didn't figure that out, but they know it was some sort of fairy, though, because at the end, there was a person who was sitting there in the library, and they were talking to him, and one of the things that he said was, I think, something about the person, because I think Jared asked a question about, like, what is in the wall, why is it messing up our house, about that.
Do you remember the description of the person that he found at the very end of the book in the last chapter?
Short, about as tall as a pencil. That's all I know.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, like a fairy, though. It was probably a fairy, so if it was a dude, they call them brownies, I guess? Wasn't that what they're called?
We know that this field guide is kind of really, really big, but we really only learn about a couple of things in the field guide, because the book kind of stops at the end. They're talking about at the very end, the last page says, it wasn't a small book. All these entries, all these things are real. Jared, that's a lot of real. And then suddenly, Jared understood what she was saying. If you looked at it that way, it was a big book, an absolutely huge book, too large to even comprehend. And worst of all, they were only at the beginning. In the book, we really only hear about 2 of these creatures or fairies. And the first one that it kind of talks about is a brownie. And the second one it talks about is a boggart. So what's the difference between those 2 things? Did we catch that?
A brownie is a man who's like a nice fairy and helps people. A boggart is still a man, but he's kind of crazy, out of control. Like, he would get mad easily, or like he would destroy the house, like what they did to Jared. And like how they described a boggart was mischief. So they create mischief, and like they're I forget how to say it, but it starts with chip. I forget how to say it, but it's like, yes.
Mm-hmm.
And they said that in the book. So if they're mischievous, they would have to be ruining the house, and they're kind of crazy. It's like
I'm wondering what happened at the end when I wonder why he laid that poem out and wanted him to find the book, but then that boggart at the end who said something to him said that the book is too powerful for a man like him. Like, he said something about that the book was too powerful for him. So I'm wondering why, like, that handwriting, that riddle was laid out there. He solved it, but then they say that he can't read it because it's too powerful for him.
Because whenever because it has a whole entire details about their history and about like what they are and how to describe them and how to get them, and they think, why would you give them all that information? And whenever you have that, you get more curious and curious. Whenever you get more curious, you want to know things, and after that, you just kind of want to take control of it.
But I'm still like, but why wouldn't he be able to? Why wouldn't he be able to? Why wouldn't he be able to read the book? Like, what's so wrong with him learning about fairies?
Because
he doesn't seem like he wants to capture it at all. He seems like he really just wants to he wants to make sure that they're. Oh, okay. He just wants to make sure that they're kind of like out of his house. So I think that he's afraid that they're gonna try to hurt the fairies in the process of getting them out of the house.
Yes, and then it's about him basically, because he's a fairy too, and if he wants to get rid of the fairies in the house, he's obviously gonna have to kick him out too.
And we all saw what happened when they messed up the Boggart's house in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
Now let me read you. You guys brought up some awesome points. Let me read you what the what's his name? Thimbletack. Yeah, Thimbletack at the end. He comes in and he says, Arthur Spiderwick's book is not for your kind. Too much about Fae for a mortal to find. All who have kept it have come to harm, be it through violence or through charm. Throw the book away, toss it in a fire. If you do not heed, you will draw their ire. And ire meaning kind of their hatred, their anger in this case. So now that kind of brings up a good point, because Ava had a point about why would he write this note? Why would I think Brownie write this note for him if he wasn't, if he didn't want him to have it when they met? Was it him who wrote it? Was it someone else? What do you think?
I think it was
somebody else.
I think it's somebody else, because he wouldn't, if he's just telling him right now about it, but I think maybe the author who wrote the Spiderwick, probably the guy who wanted him to find it, so he learns more about it and tries to do things to get rid of him or do something.
I'm wondering if I'm wondering if, since he said that it's too powerful for your kind, then why did Arthur Spiderwick write the book if he was a human? Does that mean he's not a human? Because he wrote the book.
Probably both. He's probably
mean
half
he's
human
not a
and
human?
half fairy. Is
Do
he half
we-
fairy and half?
I don't know. Do we know what happened to Arthur Spiderwick?
It got lost. And then,
We know that the guy lived. He was their like aunt,
Great
grandpa, or something like that.
second grandpa.
Yeah, they were related, but pretty distant. He was
And
there in the
wasn't, like-
1900s.
And wasn't almost all of his stuff still just laying around there and was never really taken out?
Yeah.
So would that mean that something sudden just happened to him and he didn't really have it he
Well-
died or something and didn't really have a chance to clear all of his stuff out or something?
Well, if we think back to what they said, what Thimbletack says about them, is all who have, he's talking about the book. He says, all who have kept it have come to harm, be it through violence or through charm.
Oh, he probably found
What does
the
it
book.
mean by
Well,
He probably wrote it and then found the book, and then it gave him harm.
He wrote the
Because-
book, though.
yeah, he did write the book because it's his field guide, right?
Yeah, but he
So would that
probably.
mean he
Do you want to go, Ava?
Sure. You can finish your thought.
Me?
Yeah,
Well,
you can finish your thought.
He's probably, because whenever they say it, he could probably be the author of it, but he probably took control too much and he came to harm in it. So that's how it happened. Even though he's the author of it, he probably still, the author doesn't really matter. It could probably still happen to him.
But I want to know who else has lived in the house after Arthur Spiderwick, because it says that all who have kept it have either been in harm or have either been in harm or charm. So would that mean more than one person has owned this book before? So would Arthur Spiderwick have written this book a long, long time ago, so that multiple people have read it before and either come to violence or harm?
Mr. Miller,
Violence or charm in it?
did they say when the book was made? Ever?
The field guide, Arthur Spiderwick's field guide.
Yeah.
Yes, I will look for it while you guys are talking.
Okay. Ava, can you repeat your question again?
So would that mean that multiple people have Arthur Spiderwick wrote the book a long, long time ago, and multiple people have read it from that time of Arthur Spiderwick writing the book and Jared, but that also means that what's the Boggart's name again?
I think they just said
Thimbletack.
Bogart. Oh, Thimbletack.
That means that Thimbletack has been around for a super duper long time too, to experience all these people who have owned this book.
Hold on, Mr. Miller showed us a picture of that. Mr. Miller, wasn't he old?
Let me show you something in just a second. Okay, so there's a picture. They find a picture in the study. Is a watercolor painting of a man and a little girl on the desk. Underneath it, in the fake pencil, was an inscription: my darling daughter Lucinda, age 4. And I'm trying
What's
to
his
find.
mom's name?
Trying to find.
What?
They ask.
What's-
He asks their mom if they've ever had, if they had anyone named Arthur, Spiderwick, and she says, oh, that was Lucinda's maiden name before she got married. Trying to find, I think she says how long ago that was, but I believe, if I can't find the date here, it was in the early 1900s, very early 1900s.
Well,
What's his mom's name?
1909?
I don't know. I think they might just call her mom.
yeah.
But I think
But,
Lucinda is her, aunt. Oh, here we go.
I think what
She says Spiderwick. So that's your great aunt Linda's surname. It was my mother's maiden name. Maybe Arthur was one of her relatives. So it's her aunt's
So the
dad, her
so the
great
book
aunt
was
dad. So it was written probably a long time ago. So you're right, Ava.
Yeah. So I think maybe oh, it was put away. Maybe they never found it. Maybe they never cared about it until now. What happened to him? And they figured it out. Maybe it happened to Arthur. He hid it. Now, no, maybe like one or two people came across it, but after a while, they died and they left it in the same exact place.
yeah. How
And
did
maybe they just left it alone for a very long time and came back to it, and now it's in, I forget the kid's name, but
Jared.
in his hand, Jared, in Jared's hand.
Yeah, doesn't like how would everybody like so when they're done with the book, are they instructed to like put it back in the exact same spot, the note and the book? Because I would think that as soon as you read the piece of paper, you figure out the riddle, most people would just throw away the piece of paper. So instructed to put the book back and the paper back in the same exact spot so everybody could find it.
Wait, okay, Mr. Miller, didn't they say went on that, what was it called, the attic? If you step on the wrong board, you'll fall.
Yes.
What if they made it like that? What if they made it like that so nobody could get to the Spiderwick Chronicles and not get hurt? And what if they fell in the wrong board and they fell through and they were hurt and they never went back up there until Jared did one day and grabbed it because he knew already about it. He didn't know about the Spiderwick Chronicles, but he knew about the floorboards.
Then how would
What if
anybody continue, sorry.
Oh, no, you were good.
Then how would anybody be able to actually get the book?
Well, because they probably didn't know about it. They probably were just new to it, and they went into the house thinking, oh, let's go up to the attic and put some stuff in the thing. They go to the chest, they found it, but they probably stepped on the wrong board, fall through it, and got hurt until Jared came in and already knew about it because of his grandma. After that long time, he heard about like what's happening down in there, and he wanted to see for himself. And after he got that clue, he became suspicious and wanted to see it for himself. So he went upstairs and stepped on the boards that weren't wobbly.
I think you've got, some really good points. I'm not really sure why the book was put there. To me, it feels like someone had to put it there. Maybe they realized that something was going to come for them, because we only hear about two kind of fairies in this book, a brownie and a boggart. And a brownie, turns into a boggart when something bad happens to it. But when we meet Thimbletack at the end, he looks pretty normal. Let me pull up a picture of him. He looks pretty normal. So he looks pretty friendly. But they actually see, you guys didn't get to see this, but in the book, the physical copy, we have a page from Arthur Spiderwick's field guide, and we see a boggart, and he looks very different. So a boggart looks pretty different than a brownie, but a brownie turns into a boggart. So I wonder, because we know that Thimbletack was the one, I think, that had the house in the wall. So can he turn back? Can they flip-flop back?
I think so.
Maybe, did they actually say he was a boggart, or did the kids assume he was a boggart?
They kind of just suspected, I think, because of all the bad stuff that was happening to them.
He's probably not the boggart then. He's probably the one who probably got mad that his house got ruined, but he's not a boggart. He's probably just got mad and wanted to make sure that they would make it right between them. He's probably not medieval and like wants to go after them so hard like that. Maybe he was just mad that his house got destroyed, because if I was in his shoes, I'd be mad if my room got destroyed or my house.
I'm wondering how long, like, those types of fairies can live. Because if he's seen all these different types of, if Thimbletak has seen like Arthur Spiderwick, and he's seen all the people that it has happened, like all the bad things it has happened, the book has done to them, then I'm wondering how long he can like live, and if he was really good friends with Arthur or not, because of all the people that like kind of like, since I'm assuming that once they find that book, they kind of want to go and search to see if it's true or not. So I'm wondering if he was like really good friends with Arthur Spiderwick or something, because Arthur like, wrote the book about him. But I'm kind of assuming he doesn't really like humans that much. I'm kind of guessing that he doesn't like humans, and something to do with humans, like I think like humans like betrayed him or something that makes him like kind of, annoyed, and when people make him mad, he definitely is gonna pay him back.
I can see where you're coming from. Yeah. But also, they probably could live for a very long time. If they aren't figured out about and nobody knows about them, they probably can live for a pretty good amount of time. And also in the photo, he looked old, but he didn't look that old.
So this book kind of really brings up a lot of questions. Now, we kind of talked about how there's so many pages of this book, and we only really hear of a couple, about the brownie and the boggart. So we only really learn about those two, and if we're assuming that all the stuff that happened to the Mallory and to Simons, tadpoles and mice and things, if that was happening to them because of the boggart, that doesn't seem like that's not that much harm, But there are so many other pages. I wonder if there are things in here that are worse, that maybe could cause Arthur Spiderwick or the people that found his field guide before them and kind of, cause them to run into that trouble, disappearing maybe, because it seems like his house is kind of just left. So I wonder if there are some more fairy type things that we're going to hear about that do kind of have more power, more impact.
Can I say something?
Absolutely.
Okay. What if they're not disappearing? What if something, because at the end they said they're only at the beginning. That doesn't mean that what if the other people had finished the book, and at the end it said something about a quest or something to find something, and they weren't disappearing, but they were just going somewhere but haven't came back because they can't find it. That's a lot of things that happen in other books, that they make a big deal about it and they suspense it, but how they put it, they think like, oh, they're probably not going away, they're not disappearing, they're not dying. I know whenever I read the Winds of Fire series, book 3, Glory disappeared. Well, it doesn't well, actually does. And all of the other rainforest dragons disappear too. But they aren't dead. They're not dying. They just disappear because somebody captured them. What if the same exact thing is happening to the fairies and the other people who are doing it? They say it at the end of the book, and they say they're going on a quest. What if they're just sending them on a quest? They're not disappearing or anything.
It's an interesting theory. So maybe they're somewhere having some sort of mission. Maybe they are. Maybe they aren't. That's a very interesting theory that kind of brings us into the next book, where this book kind of this series is very interesting because it's 5 books, but each book is really only like a part of this whole story. Like when I think of, book one of Harry Potter, like it's part of a bigger story, yes, but it's pretty much its own storyline. Like you could read book one and that was it. And you don't really, you could be satisfied not reading the rest. But this one, I feel like we really are only in the very, very beginning of the story. We had a little problem with the fairies in the house, but I don't think we've gotten to the big problem in this book yet. I think that's still to come. So I'm really interested to see what happens in the next couple of books because I feel like the story's not finished or not even close to finished. There's 4 more books. I feel like we don't know much of anything that's really going to happen yet. And the author kind of left it up to us to speculate. So let's just kind of end with, because we kind of touched on all the points. Um, let's kind of end with like, what do you think's going to be the next steps that happen in the book? Like, what do you think's going to happen in book 2 or 3? Like, what's going to be happening next after the end of the field guide? What are your predictions?
I think that what might happen next is that they read more into this thing. They're trying to keep it from their mom, but what next happens that they find something else that leads them closer and closer to the end.
I think they're gonna try to get like a ton of information from like Thimbletack. Wait, was that his name? I think they're gonna try to get a bunch of information from him and try to figure out who is this Arthur Spiderwick. Like what can we? Are there more fairies that live in this house? Can we see all the fairies? I think they're just gonna like keep asking Thimbletack a bunch of these questions to figure out what's going on.
I can see how that would happen, Ava. And they probably are going to ask him a lot of questions, like about what is going to happen and like, is there like more information to Spiderwick Chronicles? Is there like a second book? Who is Arthur? And other questions probably. And what happened to Arthur? And maybe that would lead to him why he said they would get hurt or harmed through charm or whatever they said, I think.
Very cool. Well, you guys did a great job. You had a lot of things that, went even a lot farther than what I had thought and what I had kind of thought of. Now, Arthur Spiderwick probably going to be someone we maybe learn about in the next coming books. But this was a great discussion, and I'm excited to read the next one. Are you guys?
Can we? Are we? Please? Yes?
I will give you some access to the next one. Don't worry.